Dude, I'm calling that pitch perfect, man.
Well, for the audio listeners.
For the audio listeners, it's just the intro to Law & Order.
If you are listening to the audio version, that is the Law & Order theme, but with visuals from True Detective.
Yeah. And it exactly matched the style. It looked amazing. All right, first of all, Brecky, have you seen True Detective?
Just the first episode so far.
Okay,
but I am fine with being spoiled.
Okay, well then I feel like we should spoil that last. What else do we have to spoil?
Cosmos.
Yeah?
And did you watch any more Archers?
Oh, I did not. Are they back on the air? Yeah, I
know.
Yeah. There was like a 3 week
4 episodes behind now.
Ah, damn it. Okay, no, I'll jump into all of those. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. So we can do Cosmos and True Detective. Should we do Cosmos first?
Yeah, let's do Cosmos first because spoiler alert, it's
science happens.
That's exactly. So let me start with the things I really, really dug about this episode. And I actually have very few complaints. The biggest surprise to me was last week I watched the premiere using an over-the-air antenna, so everything's like uncompressed or as close to uncompressed as you're ever going to see. The highest quality presentation. This week I watched it on Hulu, and I was astonished. In relatively not even 720p, I was thrilled with how much of the story carried. Like, it still held my interest. It's clear that it wasn't just the visual eye candy that sucked me in. How have you experienced them so far, Tom?
I was bored.
Really?
Yeah. I really, really enjoy the opening. It feels, I could tell Brandon Braga, who did Star Trek stuff, is involved because it starts to fire me up that let's explore space. And then they went right into the origins of life. I liked the dogs thing. As a dog owner, that played to my base. So sure. I was into that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Explaining speciation and natural selection through dogs. It's actually artificial selection. I thought that was nifty. They didn't overdo the cartoon this time, although Correct. I could have still done without it. But then they got into the long explanation of natural selection and how DNA works. And man, I tell you what, when they did the callback at the end where they used Carl Sagan's voice to talk about what molecules do, which is the name of the episode, I really missed Carl Sagan. I'm like, that was a great way of explaining this. I just kind of got distracted wading through Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now, he brought me back when they went to Titan at the end because I'm way into Titan. I'm a Titan fanboy. And I really enjoyed that. And I thought that was done well and very visually compelling. But most of the middle of that episode just lost me. Lost me in like, I didn't understand it, but I was just like, seems like a boring way to explain this.
Okay, so let me flip that around in a couple of ways. First of all, number one, I was intrigued. I did feel like the pacing was, in general, very good. I'm going to suspect that the only reason you didn't love the story of evolution is because it was so familiar to you. I will say that I've never seen a presentation quite like what they did with the evolution of the eye. I think they did a very smart thing by taking what is usually held up as the single example of why evolution can't explain the eye, and that whole split screen of what the creatures look like, what the optical devices throughout the various different creatures look like, and then to have creatures' point of view, it was a giant breath of fresh air. I adored it. I thought it was a fresh perspective on it. I think it made it approachable in a way that I've never seen that story, because I've seen Richard Dawkins give that talk about how, yes, it is beneficial to be able to separate light from dark. Yes, it is better to, as you get essentially a camera obscura in there and then eventually put a lens in it and fill it with jelly and then go out on, out of the water and so on. I loved all of that. The only part of the origins of life that I didn't like was the part where it just felt so out of place when they just sort of stopped and they're like, and by the way, evolution's a fact. So eat that, people. Like that, you shouldn't have to do it. Carl Sagan, I don't think would ever do that. I think he would tell the story and let the story stand on its own. I think that's what's beautiful about his, poetic prose at the end of the episode. And I think that's what stood out about it. I don't know. Outside of that one moment, I pretty much adored the entire thing from beginning to end. And I thought it was good. I thought that that Neil deGrasse Tyson comes across as much more relatable this time. I think the fact that it starts off with a story and a theme from the first moment, which we did not get in the first episode. First episode was like tweeting science facts, like you're reading Phil Plate's Twitter feed. I did not get that sense this time, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. Brecky, did you see it?
I've only seen the first episode as well here. And one of my criticisms, again, was the entire, well, religion sucks. Here's a show about science.
Right.
They really don't need that angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get that angle as much in the first episode, which we talked about last week. I see what you guys are talking about. I felt like they were talking so historically about religion that people who believe in God didn't need to feel like that was targeting them. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, there were lots of people did crazy things and all kinds of stuff way back in the 1600s, 1500s. That's not what talking about us. This episode felt more like an assault, and because of that, like, an evolution's a fact, not because that's wrong to say, but because if you're going to persuade someone, and maybe that's not the point, maybe they don't care, you don't persuade them by going, this thing you don't believe is a fact. Boom.
Well,
and the eye thing, I agreed at first, Brian. Like when they went to the eye thing, I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting how they handle this. And I loved the idea of showing the creature's eyes view and taking it slowly and saying, this is how this selection happens. This is the advantage it gives it. I'm like, this is going good. And then it just stalled for me and it slowed. And I'm like, no, come on, keep going. Get us to the human eye. And then they're like, and then you come out of the water and it's effed up. Well, let's move on to the next topic. I'm like, no, you didn't pay off.
Well, I don't know what there was to pay off, because the aha moment, once you
want to
see...
show the human eye, like, and that last bit is what gives us the eye we all are seeing out of.
Yeah, but again, I felt like they kind of did that, in that at the end they said pretty much all eyes work this exact same way. Like, I thought that was a sufficient payoff for me, you know, as far as the nature of the story, because the difficult thing, the argument about the complexity of the eye is that there's such a gap between, you know, oh, there's no use to half an eye, and the entire thing was like, no, there's tremendous use to half an eye. Look at all these examples of everyone who benefits from half an eye. If I had a complaint about this episode, it was, number one, playing defense is I feel like beneath Cosmos. Whether or not it's beneath science, that's up to you. But it's certainly beneath Cosmos as Carl Sagan originally did it. And they played defense, which I didn't want to see. The other thing I wish I'd seen more of, I wish I'd seen more exploration of what might be on the methane lakes of Titan. I enjoyed seeing the fact that you know, we're seeing the only other world in our solar system where there's weather, where there's rain and there's rivers and there's lakes and there's oceans and so on. But they sort of hedged at the end when they're like, oh, what was that? Out of the corner of the eye? I don't know. We'll find out later.
I know. I was so excited. I was like, what are they going to show? What are they going to show?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing.
Well, and they did the same trick in the Hall of Extinction. I thought the Hall of Extinction was a great metaphor where they could talk about all the desiccated corpses on the road that brings us to humanity. But then they're all like, what's that one over there? Giant looming extinction threat? Don't know. We'll find out later. It's like, all right, jerks. Come on. We get it. Global warming. Humans, terrible. Fine.
Also, they made it sound, and this is just a minor point, but they're like, somewhere exists the Hall of Extinction. I'm like, actually, no. You just made that up for the show, which is fine. But don't pretend like it actually exists. That's silly.
Well, and they could have phrased that, and that's a minor writing quibble.
Right.
They could have written that away, because they've done a good job of saying this is a spaceship of our imagination. They make it clear that it's a metaphor. But then you're right, they did slip, and then they're like, here's an actual place somewhere being in my mind that doesn't exist in reality.
I actually am still, I feel like they're about 50%. They're batting about 500 with me. Like, there are parts like the scale bit from episode 1 and the Titan tour on this one are the ones that I'm like, oh, okay, that was fun. That keeps me coming back.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll keep watching it. And certainly I'm thrilled to have my kids watch it. And I really wish, if only there was some way to restart the experience and see it from my daughter's point of view. That would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, sure. No, and that's part of me getting stalled out, is knowing all of this stuff that they're talking about. This is not breaking new ground or showing me something that I'm stunned by most of the time. Right. Brecky, is that how are you feeling about the level of the science?
I like it. I mean, I come from a scientific background, so for me, none of this is particularly surprising. But I like it. I mean, it's close enough to explain like I'm 5 levels that I think everybody can follow along without
Yeah,
problems.
for sure.
And that's the difficult thing is when you try to appeal to everyone, that means you have to attack on so many different levels. Like you have to have a visual level where any 5-year-old can be all like, whoa, space. And yet a 35-year-old who maybe even has a PhD in physics can be like, oh, I'm so vindicated that they're addressing this interesting issue. And that's a very difficult task. And I don't mean to blame them or whatever, but as
either.
In my subjective experience, those are things that bug me.
I think it's also interesting how you watch it. I am watching it on my laptop, on the website, on Fox.com. So totally justifiable criticism of my reaction is, well, of course you're distracted, Tom. You've got chat realm running in a window, and you've got, RSS feeds that you're checking every once in a while. Like you're not going to pay attention. But to me, I'm like, yeah, but this is what Cord Killers is about, is watching what I want, where I want. I want to watch this, and the time I have to watch it is when I have to be doing some things on my laptop. So if it's good enough, it should pull me over like True Detective did.
Which I will say,
curious how Brecky's watching it.
Well, I real quick, I mean, I will say that experience did happen to me. I opened it in a window, which I did not do the first time. I had a locked off in the living room experience, but this time I had it open in a window, and at some point I realized I'm not going to get anything else done, and I just went full screen on it, which to me is a testament to its quality.
So it totally worked for you. That's cool.
Right. I have 3 27-inch monitors in front of me. One is whatever I'm working on. One is a movie or TV series, and one is social media, either a Skype or an IRC or whatever. And that's how I consume everything that I do. I always have something running on one screen.
Yeah. Well,
I love this, though. This is what Cord Killers is entirely about right here, right?
Yeah.
It's Brian being able to be like, I did it over the air with my Leaf antenna for appointment viewing, but then the next week I did it on my laptop. And Brecky's like, I've got stuff going all the time in my setup, and that's awesome.
I'll tell you what. Let me chime in one more thing on Hulu. At first I was utterly offended when it went to commercial break and it said commercial 1 of 4. I was like, 4?
Oh.
Are you crazy? And then, but then I noticed that it does one thing that's very courteous, which is to give you a total estimated time of the commercial break. And then once you get past the commercial break, you can go back again. So like knowing that I had 120 seconds, I'm like, that's long enough to go to the bathroom. It's long enough for me to get a drink or do whatever. Like all of a sudden it was as though there was a wink of like, we know you're going to get up and leave. We know you're not actually going to watch, but
it's 1978 again.
Yeah.
You know, you can't skip the commercials.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. There was an honestness to it that I
watched it on Fox.com, not on Hulu. And so I didn't ever note whether it was telling me the 104 thing. It probably doesn't.
Yeah, look for that next time. Man, you want to dive in on True Detective?
Let's do it, man. So you binged, you finished.
I did. And let me say this. First of all, I got one email at cordkillers@gmail.com, which we forgot to plug this week. Cordkillers@gmail.com, a guy saying like, what is this? The finale happens and you're talking about episode 4. What's next? You're going to talk about My Little Pony and the finale of MASH or whatever. And the answer is like, you just remember.
Yes, the answer is next week we'll be talking about the finale of MASH.
And the lost finale.
The answer, of course, is that keep in mind that the finale for True Detective happened in the middle of our busiest Diamond Club launch events at South by Southwest. There was no way we were going to catch it and be able to cover it the very next day.
Let's back it up even farther. The whole point of this show is watching what you want when you want.
That's right, sucker.
And not being roped into like, well, I have to watch it now for the season finale. So Brian couldn't watch it. He wanted to watch it when he wanted, when he could, when he wanted. He did.
On whatever device I wanted.
You get to that 4th episode and it's really built up to this, everything is running. Did it hold that for you from then on? Did it stay at that level is what I asked you.
Yeah. So first of all, the 4th episode really was this watershed moment where it flipped a switch from being a character study to an action-based, again, like True Detective type of storytelling. It was great. The 5th episode I thought was even better. I loved the fact that you had what appeared to be wrapping everything up with a bow on top. The fact that you saw our 2 protagonists come together to manufacture a complete lie that they've continued to sell for 15 years straight and or 20 years straight. And the fact that you saw the disparity that even as they're being debriefed 20 years after the fact, they're continuing to adhere to this lie in the moment. And it was deeply satisfying. They're like, we got these guys. Because there's no question that these are very bad guys. once they discover their kidnapping cage and decide to manufacture the scenario that happens at the end. Pretty much from there on out, I was all the way in. Like they owned me and they could do whatever they want with me. I loved the movement over episodes 6 and 7, where it stopped being about what used to happen, and now it's the story of what's happening right now, and the fact that they have a reason to come together 20 years after the case happens and years after their relationship has completely degraded, and that you know what it reminded me of? I kept thinking of that moment in Copland. Did you ever see Copland?
No, I didn't.
Copland it's a story of corruption within a whole town of police basically living there, and at one point Robert De Niro says, "I gave you the chance to be a cop and you blew it," like a real cop, basically somebody who's going to solve the case. These guys have nothing to benefit, nothing to gain from solving this crime. They're nothing but stirring up troubles. And in that regard, there were echoes of The Wire, where it's like there's no bodies. There's no reason for them to put themselves out for this. There's no reason anyone should own this in the force. And the fact that they do, that they're deeply motivated, and it's because of the horrific nature of seeing the evidence that that Matthew McConaughey or Cole has retrieved. I dug it. I was all the way in. And then finally, going into the last episode, I knew some people didn't like the last episode. I didn't know why. I still don't know why. I found it deeply satisfying. The only complaint I might have is that it was not very realistic, that once they realized they had no signal and they clearly had their guy, seems like it would be worth a 15-minute drive to go out, call in the resources, and cause a dragnet. Instead, they went for a more Hollywood kind of ending for it. I totally thought both of them were going to die, was kind of thrilled. At that moment, I looked to see how much time was left in the episode, and I was like, well, maybe they don't die. And then to see the spiritual transformation that Cole had, I dug it. I dug all of it. I dug everything from beginning to end. I loved the style. I loved the story. I loved the echoes of, the haunting visuals. Visually, it was such a treat. I loved the interaction between the characters. That's all I got to say about it.
I think the only thing that ever let me down, and it did, and when I say let me down, I mean, I got to that 4th episode and just was at cruising altitude, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing that ever lost altitude a little bit was the fact that we built up this Carcosa Yellow King thing, and that didn't seem to pay off. And I wonder if that did.
Say that again. I got distracted. Say it again.
The Carcosa Yellow King thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I feel like that didn't pay off. Like they built that up, and Brecky, I know you're a Lost fan. This is a lot of people's criticism of Lost too, is you built up this island mystery, and then you didn't really pay off the island as much. But that's the other side of the danger, right? Is on Lost they tried. They said, and here's what the island means, and everybody's like, oh, that's it.
We see,
right? Maybe it's better that they didn't.
Yeah, no. Here's what I got. First of all, I couldn't resist. I ended up going, because I was watching everything, on my computer screen. I went and Wikipedia'd the Yellow King and Carcosa and so on. And apparently it first appeared in a horror novel or short story in the late 1800s.
A collection of short stories by Robert Chambers that inspired H.P. Lovecraft.
Correct. Well, in the H.P. Lovecraft, it's in there, and in some of the all the way up through like Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, on the maps are cities. Carcosa is a city on there. It's just sort of this plaything that everybody picks up and plays with. And in that regard, I kind of adored that we don't know what this was. We don't know what story he was spinning, but it clearly hypnotized and enraptured whatever that group of people was that was into the pagan child rape scenario, right? And to me, that's all I need to know, is that somebody spun a story that entranced people and got them to act so far outside of what's socially appropriate.
And that's fine. And I do not criticize you for liking, enjoying that. In fact, I'm a little envious that worked for you, because I built myself up into a Twin Peaks frenzy of like, I want to find out what's in the Black Lodge. I want to get a peek at Carcosa. I want to see something out of my corner of the eye that's bigger than all of this. And they didn't do that. And R. Sharp points out, and I've heard this in a lot of places, that they're saving some of that ammo for future seasons. And that makes sense, and that's fine. I did feel like they didn't do enough to intrigue me for the rest of this empire, right? They've got it up there on the board, and there's all of those, the preacher and all of his family, and there's more to explore. I get where they're going, but I feel like the mystery throughout the season is bigger than the mystery they're pointing to for the next season.
Run that by me again. Let me try to parse this. Say that one more time.
So I think things that I can hardly now replicate.
And by the way, this is the reason I want a second pass at it, is because it's difficult to put vague feelings into words.
No, exactly. I had a hard enough time saying it the first time. I think what I'm trying to say is every episode within this season felt like it was building the mystery for me, especially after episode 4. And in the final episode, I didn't get another peek that there's a bigger mystery behind it. I got closure, which is fine, but I also don't feel like next season's going to lead me farther into the mystery. I feel like, oh, okay, now it's just an organization of people who do shitty stuff.
Yeah, you did not have an onion effect. You had a black box. Everything got sealed off, and you're like, it's all within there, and that's all there is. I think just knowing that there very likely is going to be a season 2, 3, 4, and so on, that is enough for me. And to be honest, for what it was, so much of the themes of the show were about the limited nature of what we can understand, you know, and I loved the flip-flopping between, you know, Woody Harrelson's character, who's so comfortable with his very simple, you know, Christian ethic, and is like, well, here's what's good and here's what's bad, and that's a sin and that's good, and I'm going to have sex with a woman who's not my wife, and I know I'm a bad person, versus the extraordinary complex nature of Matthew McConaughey's character, where he's talking about M-brain theory, about all of time and space and viewed from a fourth dimension, and how what seems like the illusion of free will is in fact, you know, already predetermined. And if you can see, you know, like Slaughterhouse-Five style, standing outside looking at the horizon of where things end, and yet for Matthew McConaughey to have this epiphany, which you could tell is simultaneously extraordinarily profound for him, but that if you asked him at that moment, he would also acknowledge is very likely a cognitive illusion. I loved all of that. To me, it was a personal journey that yes, it didn't take you necessarily anywhere but back to the beginning, but it was believable. I believed the characters, even if I didn't believe the ridiculous, over-the-top Hollywood nature of the narrative. I believed these people, and again, storytelling in television and movies is not the narrative. It is the style of presentation. It is the character studies. It is the level of acting, and all of that was among some of the most astonishingly. Okay, you're looking at me weird.
I feel like you just convinced me that you should start watching the second half of the current Walking Dead season.
Really? All right. Yeah. Well, then I'll tell you what. If they'll stop being silly,
because of what you just said about the narrative being character study and acting. And I'm not, I shouldn't say it now because it definitely still doesn't compare to True Detective, but that is what they're going after in that season.
Well, good. Well, look, my problem with The Walking Dead is like everything's great until all of a sudden they hit me by insulting my intelligence and having people do just stuff that's just stupid, nonsensical, and just silly out of nowhere, and then ask me to go along for it. Like if they would just stop doing that, I'd be all the way in. But yeah, I mean, I'll give it a try. But I'll tell you this much: nothing but thumbs up across the board for True Detective. I may go back and watch the whole thing again. What was amazing was Bonnie was there just for the 4th episode. She came back in at the last 10 minutes as Matthew McConaughey. Like she has no idea what happened between the two. All she sees is Cole, you know, in a hospital gown, clearly describing a transcendent experience that he had. She was totally sucked in with that, and that's nothing but high fives to the actors, directors, the artistic direction, and everything.
Have you heard the description of the second season? The little we know so far.
No, tell me.
This was about a week ago. Nick Pizzolatto, the series creator, had an interview with HitFix. And he said the next season of True Detective is going to be about hard women, bad men, and the secret occult history of the United States transportation system.
So this sounds like it's exactly what you were suggesting.
Again.
Yeah. Okay, real quick.
NTSB.
Real quick moments that I loved. Absolutely adored the throwing their hats over the wall, like we're all in, we're gonna freaking hold this sheriff at gunpoint. And that moment with the sniper, like you think I'm bullshitting you, and all of a sudden his Maserati gets all lit up. Adored all of that. I adored the very real horror that everyone experienced watching that videotape, which so expertly shot. Like knowing that we're not going to see everything or whatever, like that, and seeing the crying kid with the blindfold on, like just suspecting what was about to happen and what would cause people to react that way. Delightful. Utterly, I mean, horrific / delightful is what I mean.
I did feel that that Cole, I wasn't convinced that Cole would really come around the way he did in the end. I mean, not that he came around exactly, but it seemed like a change that I could have used a couple more pieces to motivate me to think he would come that way, or just leave him with his like philosophical ennui. Like in the face of everything.
Well, I did not feel like this was a come to Jesus moment for him. I felt like it was a deeply confusing and emotionally difficult experience for him to have. And I think that if you hung around with him 5 more minutes, he would admit that very likely it was all a hallucination or whatever. But that in no way undid what that meant to him and how difficult that was for him to experience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is it. Unless we've got anything else, I think we're good. Cosmos and True Detective, eh?
Yeah, no, all we did was talk about the nature of time, space, the futility of life, the insignificant nature of our being in this vast, wide, infinite universe. What does it matter? Heat, death of the universe coming up next week.
To complete that, we need to talk about Woody Harrelson's fake belly and how convincing it was.
Okay, I believed it, dude. I believed all of it.
Didn't even think it was fake.
No, and I loved the way they represented their ages. You could tell that they're putting a little makeup to add extra wrinkles in the crow's feet and so on.
That was good.
I thought that was all great. All right.
So next week, what are we going to do? You're done with TD.
I'll get caught up on Archer for sure.
All right.
And let's see if maybe you and I can pick up. Tell you what, people tweet us at Ace Detect at Schwood if there's a random movie you think we should watch and analyze.
That's a great idea.
Then maybe we haven't. We'll take on homework. I can watch a movie for you guys.
Yeah, I'll watch a movie. I'll cut a movie.
I'm sorry.
I will also try to watch The Shield.
All right. Yeah. No.
Because now that True Detective's out of my life, although I am doing Deadwood, but now that True Detective's out, I've got more room.
I'll talk Deadwood with you if you want, but I prefer The Shield.
Did you watch Deadwood?
I did. I watched the first season of Deadwood.
You did.
And then when it came time for the second season, I heard that it was canceled. And I was like, well, I'm not even going to bother then. So
I want to plow ahead with The Shield. I'm good with that.
Okay. Right on, man.
That's it. We're going to cut a bitch. See you later.